The galaxy had forgotten about humanity. 847 years was a long time, even for species that lived for centuries. To the 12 great civilizations of the galactic conquered, humans were nothing more than a sad story told to children. A warning about what happens when a young species grows too fast and burns too bright. Ambassador stood before the great window of 7, watching the stars spin slowly past. The space station hung at the crossroads of 3 major trade routes, making it the perfect place for diplomatic meetings. Had attended hundreds of such meetings in his long life. His crystalline body caught the light from distant suns, making him glow with soft blue colors. They were considered beautiful by most species, though had never cared much for such opinions. Today's summit was supposed to be simple, a trade dispute between 2 minor species, nothing that would take more than a few hours to resolve. Was already thinking about his return journey home when the alarms began. Every screen on the station turned red. Every speaker screamed with warning tones. Watched as diplomats from a dozen different species began to panic, running in all directions like insects when their nest is disturbed. A young officer rushed to his side. Her crystal form was flickering with stress colors. "Ambassador, you need to see this," she said. Her voice was shaking. Followed her to the main monitoring center. The room was filled with officers from different species, all staring at their screens with expressions of confusion and fear. "What is happening?" demanded. An old name turned to face him. There were small creatures no taller than a human child, but their minds were sharper than any blade. They remembered everything. Every fact, every face, every moment of their long lives was stored perfectly in their heads, had lived for over 1,000 years. She had been old when humanity still existed. "A signal," said. Her voice was quiet but could hear the fear in it, coming from the Sol quarantine zone. Felt his crystal body grow cold. The Sol quarantine zone, the dead place, the grave of humanity. "That is impossible," he said. "There is nothing there, nothing has been there for 8 centuries. "I know," replied. She touched her console and brought up the signal data. "But someone is broadcasting, and the signal is not random noise or leftover machinery. It is a message, a deliberate, targeted message sent to every major communication hub in the galaxy." Stared at the data. The signal was old in design, using technology that no species had used for hundreds of years. But it was strong, incredibly strong. Whoever sent it wanted to be heard. "Can you translate it?" he asked. Was silent for a long moment. Her large eyes blinked slowly. "I already have," she said. "The language is human, old human, the kind they spoke before the burning." The burning, that was what the conquered called it. The day when 5 species decided that humanity was too dangerous to exist. The day when fleets from across the galaxy descended on Earth and every human colony. The day when billions died in fire and radiation and vacuum. Had not been alive then, but he knew the stories. Everyone knew the stories. "What does the message say?" he asked. Small hands trembled as she pressed the playback button. A voice filled the room. It was speaking in an old human language, but the translation appeared on every screen. The voice was calm, cold, patient. It sounded like someone who had waited a very long time to speak these words. "We remember what you did. We are coming home." The room went silent, could hear his own heartbeat echoing through his crystal chest. "That is not possible," someone said. A tall diplomat had pushed his way to the front of the crowd. His gray skin was pale with shock. "The humans are dead. We made sure of it. We burned their worlds. We hunted their ships. There were no survivors." Looked at him with ancient eyes. "Perhaps you were wrong." The diplomat began to argue, but raised his hand for silence. "Where exactly did this signal come from?" he asked. A young officer checked his console. "The source is located in the Sol system. Specifically, it appears to be coming from Earth itself." Closed his eyes. Earth. The human, the first planet to burn. It had been reduced to a dead rock, its oceans boiled away, its atmosphere poisoned. Nothing could live there, nothing could have survived. But someone had sent a message from its surface. Within hours, the news had spread to every corner of the galaxy. Emergency sessions were called on 100 different worlds. The Galactic Concord, which had maintained peace for 8 centuries, was suddenly filled with fear and confusion. Watched as old alliances began to crack. The 5 species who had led the burning, the, were suddenly being questioned by their allies. Species who had joined the conquered later, who had been told that the burning was a necessary act of self-defense, were now demanding to know the truth. And underneath all the political chaos, one question hung in the air like smoke after a fire. If the humans were still alive, what did they want? Found alone in her quarters later that night, the Old was staring at a holographic display showing old images of Earth, green forests, blue oceans, white clouds, a beautiful world before the fire came. "You were alive during the burning," said. It was not a question. Nodded slowly. "I was young then, only 200 years old. I remember the celebrations when the fleets returned. I remember the speeches about how the galaxy was finally safe." "Did you believe them?" Was silent for a long moment. "I wanted to believe them," she finally said. "The humans were strange creatures. They grew so fast. In just a few thousand years, they went from simple animals to space-traveling civilization. They were curious and clever and stubborn. They never knew when to stop pushing forward." "That does not sound like a reason to destroy an entire species," said. Turned to look at him. Her eyes were wet with old tears. "No," she agreed. "It does not. But fear makes people do terrible things. The old species, the ones who had ruled the galaxy for millions of years, they saw humanity as a threat. Not because humans were evil, but because humans were competition. Because in another 1,000 years, humans might have surpassed us all." Looked at the images of Earth. He tried to imagine what it must have been like for the humans, to look up at the sky and see death coming, to know that their entire species was being erased because others were afraid of what they might become. "And now they are back," he said quietly. Nodded. "Now they are back, and I do not think they have returned to make peace." The signal continued to broadcast for 3 more days. The same message over and over again. "We remember what you did. We are coming home." Then on the 4th day it stopped. The silence was somehow worse than the message had been, because silence meant that the humans were done talking. Silence meant that whatever came next would be spoken in actions, not words. Stood at his window again, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, in the darkness between worlds, humanity was moving. They had waited for 847 years. He had a feeling they would not wait much longer. Deep within the nebula, where radiation storms made travel impossible and sensors became useless, humanity had been hiding for 847 years. Admiral stood on the bridge of the HSS Resilience and looked out at her fleet. 400 warships floated in perfect formation, their dark hulls reflecting the purple and red light of the nebula. Each ship was a miracle of survival. Each ship represented generations of work, sacrifice, and stubborn refusal to die. Was 63 years old, though she looked older. Her hair had turned iron gray before she reached 40. Her face was lined with the marks of a hard life. She had been born on a generation ship, raised in metal corridors, trained to fight since she was old enough to hold a weapon. She had never seen a natural sky. She had never felt real wind on her face, but she remembered the stories. Every human did. The stories of Earth, the stories of green grass and blue water and yellow sunlight, the stories of the burning. "Admiral, all ships report ready." Turned to look at Lieutenant. He was young, barely 25, with sharp eyes and a calm voice. He had been born on the Resilience, just like his parents and grandparents before him. 8 generations had lived and died on these ships, never knowing anything but metal walls and recycled air. "Thank you," Lieutenant said. "Signal all commanders. We will begin the briefing in 10 minutes." Nodded and turned to his console. Watched him work for a moment. He was a good officer, smart and careful and loyal. But there was something sad about him, about all the young ones. They had inherited a war they never chose. They carried anger for a crime committed against people they had never met. Walked to the center of the bridge, where a holographic display showed a map of the galaxy. She touched a control, and the map zoomed in on a small section of space. The Sol system. Home. "Chief Engineer," she called out. "Status report on the fold drives." A woman's voice came through the speakers. Was 60 years old, the same age as, and they had known each other since childhood. Was brilliant. Perhaps the most brilliant engineer humanity had ever produced. She had spent her entire life keeping the fleet running, finding solutions to problems that should have been impossible, building new ships from asteroids and salvage. "All drives are operational," Admiral reported. "We can make the jump whenever you give the order." "And the weapons systems?" "Fully charged and ready. The enemy will not enjoy meeting us." Allowed herself a small smile, had a talent for understatement. The holographic display flickered, and suddenly faces began to appear around. The commanders of the other ships, joining the briefing from across the fleet. Men and women of all ages, all wearing the same gray uniforms, all carrying the same weight of history on their shoulders. Commanders began, "I will not waste time with long speeches. You all know why we are here. You all know what we have been preparing for." She touched the display and images began to appear. Old images preserved for centuries. Images of Earth before the burning. Beautiful cities, happy people, children playing under blue skies. Then new images, fire falling from space, cities turning to ash, oceans boiling, millions of people dying in seconds. 847 years ago, the Galactic Concord decided that humanity did not deserve to exist, said. Her voice was calm but cold. 5 species led the attack. They burned they destroyed our colonies. They hunted our ships. They believed they had killed every last one of us. She paused, letting the silence stretch. They were wrong. The commanders nodded. They had heard this history many times, but it never lost its power. 17 generation ships escaped the burning, continued. They fled into the nebula, the one place in the galaxy where the conquered could not follow. For 8 centuries, we have survived in this place. We have built new ships. We have developed new technology. We have trained new soldiers, and we have waited. She touched the display again. The map changed, showing the current position of the fleet. 3 months ago, our scouts confirmed what we have long suspected. The 5 species who burned our world are still thriving. They sit on the Galactic Concord like kings, enjoying the peace they built on our graves. They have told the galaxy that we were dangerous, that we were aggressive, that the burning was necessary to save the galaxy from the human threat. A young commander spoke up. Admiral, our scouts also reported that many species in the Concord did not participate in the burning. Some were not even members of the Concord at that time. Do we intend to make war on all of them? Shook her head. No, we are not monsters. We are not going to become what they accused us of being. The species who did not participate in the burning are not our enemies. Only the 5. Only the murderers. Another commander, an older man with a face, leaned forward. And what exactly is our goal, Admiral? Revenge. Considered the question carefully. Revenge would be easy, she admitted. We have 400 warships. We have weapons that the conquered has never seen. We could burn their worlds the way they burned ours. We could make them feel what we felt. She looked around at the faces of her commanders. But that is not what we are going to do. We did not survive for 8 centuries just to become killers. We survived because we wanted justice. We survived because we wanted to go home. She touched the display one final time. Earth appeared again, but different now. Not the beautiful blue world of the old images, but a gray and brown planet and dead. Our home is still there, said quietly. It is damaged, it is poisoned, but it is still there, and we are going to take it back. Lieutenant raised his hand. Admiral, what if the conquered refuses to let us return? What if they try to finish what they started? Looked at him with steady eyes. Then we will show them why they were afraid of us in the first place. The briefing ended and the commanders returned to their ships. Across the fleet, final preparations began. Soldiers checked their weapons. Engineers ran last tests on the engines. Pilots strapped into their fighters remained on the bridge of the Resilience, staring at the map of the galaxy. Somewhere out there, beyond the nebula, the species who had murdered her ancestors were living their comfortable lives, believing themselves safe. They had no idea what was coming. His voice came through the speakers again. Admiral, we are ready. All ships are in position. Took a deep breath. This was the moment. 847 years of hiding, of building, of waiting. It all came down to this. All ships, she said, her voice carrying across the fleet, engage fold drives. We are going home. 400 ships vanished from the nebula in a flash of light, leaving nothing behind but empty space. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity was not extinct. And humanity had not forgotten. The planet 4 was a peaceful world. It orbited a yellow sun, not unlike the sun that had once warmed Earth. Its surface was covered with forests and lakes, and its cities were built from crystal that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows. The who lived there considered themselves lucky. They had a beautiful home, far from the political troubles of the inner conquered worlds. Governor was old, even by standards. His crystal body had grown dark with age, and he moved slowly now, his joints stiff and his light dim. But his mind was still sharp. He remembered things that Younger had only read about in history books. He remembered stories his grandfather had told him, stories about a strange species called humans who had once traveled the stars. Governor, we have a problem. Looked up from his desk. His chief of security, a young named Kel, was standing in the doorway. His crystal form was flickering with stress colors. What kind of problem? Asked. Kel did not answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the window and pointed up at the sky. Followed his gaze. At first he saw nothing unusual, just the familiar blue sky of 4 with a few clouds drifting past. But then he noticed something strange. A shadow. A dark shape hanging in the sky where no shape should be. What is that? Asked. A ship, Kel replied. His voice was tight with fear. It appeared 10 minutes ago, just appeared. One moment there was nothing, and the next moment it was there. Our sensors did not detect it until it was already in orbit. Felt a chill run through his crystal body. No ship could hide from sensors. No ship could appear from nowhere, unless... Have you tried to communicate with it? He asked. Yes, no response, but Governor, Kel hesitated. The design of the ship, it does not match any species in the Conquered. We checked our records. The closest match we could find was human, finished for him. Kel nodded slowly. Stared up at the shadow in the sky. He had heard the news about the signal from Earth, of course. Everyone in the galaxy had heard, but he had not truly believed it. He had thought it was a mistake, or a trick, or some kind of natural phenomenon that had been misinterpreted. Humans were extinct. They had been extinct for 8 centuries. Everyone knew that. Everyone, it seemed, had been wrong. What do they want? Asked. I do not know, Governor, but they just started broadcasting a message. They are requesting a meeting with you. The meeting took place in the central garden of the capital city. Had chosen the location carefully. It was open and public, surrounded by thousands of who had gathered to watch. If the humans wanted to cause trouble, they would have to do it in front of witnesses. Stood in the center of the garden, waiting. His security officers were stationed around the perimeter, their weapons hidden but ready. The crowd was silent, watching the sky. Then she arrived. The human descended from above, carried by some kind of personal flying device. She landed softly on the grass, just a few meters from. She was smaller than he had expected. Humans were shorter than, and this one was shorter than most humans. She had black hair cut short, and her face was calm and patient. She wore a simple gray uniform with no decorations or badges. "Governor," she said, her voice was quiet but clear. "My name is Captain. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Studied her carefully, she did not seem threatening. She carried no visible weapons. Her posture was relaxed, but there was something in her eyes that made him uneasy, a coldness, a patience, the look of someone who had been waiting for a very long time. "You are human," said. It was not a question. "Yes. The galaxy believed your species was extinct." The galaxy was wrong. Nodded slowly. He had expected as much. "Why are you here, Captain? What do you want from us?" Reached into her uniform and pulled out a small crystal, a data storage device similar to the ones they used. She held it out too. "I am here to give you the truth," she said. Took the crystal carefully. The truth about what? About the burning. About what really happened 847 years ago. Felt his crystal body grow cold. "I know what happened. Humanity became aggressive. You attacked conquered ships. You threatened to conquer the galaxy. The conquered had no choice but to defend itself." His expression did not change. "Is that what they told you?" "It is what everyone knows." "Then everyone knows a lie." She nodded toward the crystal in his hand. "That contains evidence. Records, documents, communications, testimonies, all preserved for 8 centuries, all proving that the burning was not self-defense. It was murder." Stared at the crystal. He wanted to throw it away. He wanted to pretend this meeting had never happened. But he could not. The human was watching him with those cold, patient eyes, and he knew that she was telling the truth. "The 5 species who led the attack," continued, the. "They did not attack us because we were dangerous. They attacked us because they were afraid. Afraid that we would grow too powerful. Afraid that we would become their equals. Afraid that the galaxy might one day belong to someone other than them." "That is a serious accusation," said. "Yes, it is, and that crystal contains the proof." Looked down at the small crystal in his hand. Such a small thing to contain such a large truth. "What do you want from us?" he asked again. We were not part of the burning. We did not join the conquered until a century later." "I know," said. "You are not our enemies. We did not come here to threaten you. We came here to give you a choice." "What choice?" "The choice to know the truth. The choice to decide what kind of galaxy you want to live in." His voice was still calm, but there was something harder underneath now, something like steel. "In a few weeks our main fleet will arrive at the conquered capital. We are going to demand justice, a trial, a reckoning for what was done to our people." Felt fear rising in his crystal chest. "And if the conquered refuses?" Smiled. It was not a happy smile. "Then things will become complicated." She turned and began to walk back toward her landing spot. But after a few steps, she stopped and looked back at. "Governor, I will give you one piece of advice. When the truth comes out, and it will come out, the guilty species will try to convince everyone that we are the monsters, that we are the threat, that the burning was justified." Her eyes were like ice. "Do not believe them. Look at that evidence. See for yourself what kind of creatures would murder billions of innocent people because they were afraid of what those people might become." She activated her flying device and rose into the sky, disappearing into the shadow of her ship. Stood alone in the garden holding the crystal. Around him, the crowd was murmuring, thousands of voices trying to understand what had just happened. He looked down at the crystal one more time. Then he went inside to find a reader. He needed to know the truth. The evidence spread through the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Captain had not only given the data crystal to Governor. She had given copies to journalists, to independent traders, to scholars and scientists, and anyone who would listen. Within days, the truth about the burning was everywhere. News channels on 100 different worlds were showing the same images, the same documents, the same damning communications. The reaction was chaos. On the conquered capital station, Axiom Prime emergency sessions were held every hour. Diplomats screamed at each other across conference tables. Old alliances cracked and new ones formed. Species that had joined the conquered in good faith, believing they were part of a peaceful union, suddenly discovered that their leaders had built that peace on genocide. High Arbiter watched it all from his private chamber. He was old, even for a. His gray skin had grown pale with age, and his long fingers trembled when he was not careful. He had been a young officer during the burning, one of the commanders who had led the attack on Earth. He remembered the fire falling from his ships. He remembered the screams on the communication channels as human cities turned to ash. He had believed back then that it was necessary, that humanity was dangerous, that the galaxy would be safer without them. Now, 847 years later, he was beginning to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. High Arbiter, we have a problem. Turned to face his assistant, a young named. The young man's face was pale with fear. Another protest? Asked wearily. There had been many protests in the past few days. Species that had not participated in the burning were demanding answers. Some were even calling for the expulsion of the 5 guilty species from the conquered. No, High Arbiter, something worse, swallowed hard. The human fleet has arrived. Felt his old heart skip a beat. How many ships? 400, High Arbiter. They appeared from fold space 10 minutes ago. They are holding position around the station. 400 ships. Closed his eyes. The conquered had a defense fleet, of course, but most of those ships were spread across the galaxy, maintaining order in distant sectors. The forces protecting Axiom Prime numbered less than 50 vessels. Have they attacked? Asked. No, they are just waiting. Waiting, that was somehow worse than an attack. An attack would have been simple. Defend, fight, die if necessary, but waiting meant they wanted something, and had a terrible feeling that he knew what it was. He made his way to the main observation deck of the station. By the time he arrived, dozens of other diplomats and officials were already there, staring out at the void. The human fleet hung in space like a wall of dark metal. The ships were unlike anything the conquered had ever seen. They were angular and harsh, built for war rather than beauty. Their hulls were black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. And they were big. Some of those ships were larger than anything the conquered had ever built. They are broadcasting, someone said. A screen flickered to life and a face appeared. A human face. Male, middle-aged, with hard eyes and a jaw like stone. He wore a gray uniform with a single silver star on the collar. I am commander of the Judgment Fleet, the human said. His voice was calm and cold. I am addressing the Galactic Conquered and all species within range of this broadcast. The observation deck was silent. Every eye was fixed on the screen. 847 years ago, 5 species of the Galactic Conquered committed genocide against humanity. They burned they destroyed our colonies. They murdered billions of innocent people, and then they lied about it. They told the galaxy that we were dangerous, that we deserved to die. They built their peace on our graves and called themselves heroes. Commander paused, letting his words sink in. We could destroy this station in minutes. We could begin a war that would burn across every system the conquered controls. We have the ships. We have the weapons. We have 8 centuries of anger. Felt his legs grow weak. He had to hold onto a railing to keep from falling. But that is not why we came. The human commander leaned forward, his eyes burning with cold fire. We came for justice. We demand a trial. A public trial broadcast across the entire galaxy. The 5 species who led the burning, and the, will stand before a neutral court and answer for their crimes. Evidence will be presented. Witnesses will testify. And the galaxy will decide what kind of justice is deserved. A murmur ran through the observation deck. Some of the diplomats looked relieved. Others looked angry. The representatives of the 5 guilty species looked terrified. "If the conquered agrees to this trial," Commander continued, "we will wait peacefully. We will not fire a single shot. We will let justice take its course." His eyes hardened. "If the conquered refuses, we will release the complete archive of evidence to every independent world, every trade station, every corner of the galaxy. The 5 guilty species will be exposed as murderers. Their allies will abandon them. Their enemies will circle like predators smelling blood, and we will be waiting to pick up the pieces." The commander straightened in his chair. "You have 1 hour to decide. Humanity has waited 8 centuries for this moment. We can wait 1 more hour." The screen went dark. The observation deck exploded into chaos. Diplomats shouted at each other. Security officers rushed to their stations. Someone was crying. Someone else was laughing, though it sounded more like hysteria than humor. Stood perfectly still, watching the human fleet through the window. He remembered the day of the burning. He remembered standing on the bridge of his ship, watching Earth turn to ash. He remembered thinking that he was saving the galaxy, that he was a hero. Now, looking at those dark ships hanging in the void, he understood something he had for 800 years. He was not a hero. He had never been a hero. He was a murderer, and his victims had come for justice. The emergency session that followed was the most heated in conquered history. Representatives screamed and threatened and pleaded. The 5 guilty species argued that the trial was unnecessary, that humanity was exaggerating, that the burning had been justified. The other species demanded to know why they should protect murderers. In the end, there was no real choice. 400 warships were pointed at the station. The evidence had already been released. The galaxy already knew the truth. The vote was unanimous. The trial would proceed. High Arbiter sat in his chamber after the session, staring at nothing. His long fingers were trembling again, and this time he did not bother to hide it. 847 years ago, he had helped burn a world. He had told himself it was necessary. He had told himself the galaxy would thank him. Now the survivors had returned, and they wanted answers. Looked at his hands. These hands had given orders that killed billions. These hands had signed documents that erased an entire species from the stars. Or so he had thought. He wondered what those hands would be forced to confess in the days ahead. He wondered if there was any punishment great enough for what he had done. Outside his window, the human fleet waited in silence. They had been patient for 8 centuries. They could be patient a little longer. The trial chamber of Axiom Prime was the largest room on the station. It had been built centuries ago to handle disputes between species, to give every voice a chance to be heard. Now it was being used for something it had never been designed for, the trial of 5 civilizations for genocide. The chamber was packed with representatives from every species in the conquered. Cameras broadcast the proceedings to billions of viewers across the galaxy. This was the most watched event in galactic history. Every sentient being who could find a screen was watching. Admiral sat in the witness chair, facing the assembly. She had traded her military uniform for simple gray clothes. She carried no weapons. She looked like what she was, a tired old woman who had spent her entire life fighting a war she never wanted. The neutral judges, chosen from species that had not been part of the original conquered, listened as she spoke. "I was born on a ship," began. "A generation ship called the Hope. It was one of 17 that escaped the burning. My mother was born on that ship. So was my grandmother. So was my great-grandmother. 4 generations of my family lived and died in metal corridors, breathing recycled air, dreaming of a home we had never seen. She paused, looking around at the assembled faces. We did not choose to be refugees. We did not choose to hide in a nebula for 8 centuries. That choice was made for us by the 5 species sitting in this chamber today. Her gaze moved to the section where the delegation sat. High Arbiter was among them, his gray skin pale and his hands trembling. The burning was not self-defense, continued. Humanity was not attacking anyone. We were exploring, we were building, we were growing, yes. Perhaps too fast for some, but we were not a threat. We were simply different, and that difference frightened the old powers of the galaxy. She stood up slowly, her joints aching from age and the gravity of the station. I have testimony from survivors who remember that day. I have documents showing that the attack was planned years in advance. I have communications between the 5 species, discussing how to divide human territory after we were gone. This was not war. This was extermination. And it was done not because we were dangerous, but because we were inconvenient. The chamber was silent. Some of the representatives were weeping. Others were staring at the floor, unable to meet her eyes. Archivist was called as the next witness. The old walked slowly to the stand, her small body fragile with age. She was over 1,000 years old now, one of the few beings still alive who remembered the time before the burning. I was asked to search the archives, said, to find evidence that might support or refute the human claims. What I found, she shook her head slowly, what I found confirmed everything they said, and more. She presented her evidence, records from military archives, showing the precise calculations of how many ships would be needed to destroy each human colony. Communications between and leaders, joking about how easy the humans would be to kill. Trade documents, showing contracts signed before the attack for resources that would be taken from human worlds after their inhabitants were dead. The evidence was overwhelming. The guilty species had not even bothered to hide their crimes. They had been so certain of their success, so confident that no one would ever question them, that they had kept detailed records of everything. When finished, the chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives from innocent species demanded immediate action. The guilty species tried to defend themselves, but their words were drowned out by the anger of the assembly. The judges called for order. It took nearly an hour for the chamber to settle down. Then came the verdict. The 5 species were found guilty of genocide. The vote was not even close. Only the guilty species themselves voted for innocence, and their votes were vastly outnumbered. But now came the hardest question. What punishment did humanity demand? Commander rose from his seat. The chamber fell silent, every eye fixed on him. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. This was where the humans would reveal their true intentions. Walked slowly to the center of the chamber. He was a large man, with shoulders like a mountain and eyes like cold steel. He had lost his entire family line in the burning. Every ancestor he could have traced back to Earth had been killed in the fires. He had waited his whole life for this moment. The galaxy held its breath. I have dreamed of this day since I was a child, said. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. I have imagined standing here, looking at the faces of the species who murdered my people. I have imagined demanding their destruction, an eye for an eye, a world for a world. His hands clenched at his sides. But that is not what we want. A murmur ran through the assembly, raised his hand for silence. Revenge would not bring back the billions who died. It would not undo 8 centuries of exile. It would only create more death, more pain, more orphans and refugees. We did not survive this long to become murderers ourselves. He looked around at the assembled species. We demand 3 things. First, official recognition of the burning as genocide and humanity's reinstatement as a galactic species with full rights and protections. Nods of agreement from around the chamber. Second, reparations in the form of territory. We want the Sol system returned to us. Earth is dead, but it is still our home. We want the right to return and rebuild. More nods. This was reasonable. Third, a seat on the Galactic Concord, not as supplicants or second-class members, but as equals. We will participate in galactic affairs. We will contribute to galactic peace. We will be part of the community that was to us 8 centuries ago. His voice hardened. These are our demands. They are not negotiable, but they are also not revenge. We are not asking for the destruction of the guilty species. We are not asking for executions or war crimes tribunals. We are asking only to be allowed to exist again. The guilty species looked stunned. They had expected rage. They had expected demands for blood. They had not expected mercy. High Arbiter rose slowly from his seat. He was trembling visibly now, and his voice was weak. You would spare us, after everything we did. Looked at him with cold eyes. We would give you a chance to be better than you were. Whether you take that chance is up to you. The vote was held immediately. The result was unanimous among the neutral species. Humanity's demands were accepted. 1 year later, Admiral stood on the surface of Earth. The planet was still, the forests had not grown back, the oceans were still poison, the air was thin and harsh, but it was home. After 848 years, humanity had come home. Lieutenant stood beside her, looking up at the sky. It was the first time he had ever seen a natural sky. The first time he had ever breathed air that had not been recycled through machines. Tears were running down his face, and he did not bother to wipe them away. Was it worth it? He asked. All those centuries of waiting, all those generations who lived and died without ever seeing this. Watched as the first colony ship descended through the atmosphere. It carried 10,000 humans, the first wave of millions who would follow. They would begin the long work of healing this wounded world. It would take centuries. But humanity had learned patience in the nebula. Ask me in another century, she said. We are just getting started. Above them, the stars were coming out. The same stars that had watched over humanity since the beginning. The same stars that had witnessed the burning. The same stars that would now witness humanity's return. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was watching, waiting to see what this strange species would do next, waiting to see if humanity would keep its promise of peace, or if old Angers would boil over into war. Did not know the answer. No one did. The future was unwritten. But one thing was certain. Humanity was back. And this time, they were here to stay.